Hello, learner. Today, let us understand how gender and patriarchy impact health services. Understanding the structural disparities in healthcare requires a clear distinction between biological sex, which is the physiological classification of male, female, or intersex, and gender, which encompasses the fluid, socially constructed roles and expectations assigned to individuals. According to Lauber and Moore 2002, gender is an inescapable social institution that varies across cultures and time, dictating the divergent pressures individuals face. When these gendered roles are embedded within a patriarchal system, a social organization emerges where men hold primary power. In the healthcare sector, this dominance determines whose needs are prioritized and whose biological experiences are validated as knowledge. This patriarchal influence extends far beyond the doctor's office. It permeates the entire ecosystem of medical education, research, and policy. As observed by Sen and Oslin 2008, patriarchal norms often dictate the medical leadership, resulting in a system where the voices of women and gender minorities are frequently marginalized. This exclusion is not merely social but clinical. It affects who can access care, what type of care. Patriarchal systems reinforce stereotypes that often lead to the dismissal of women's health complaints as neurotic or exaggerated. Understanding how gender and patriarchy influence health services begins with a critical distinction between the biological and the social. Sex is typically assigned at birth based on objective anatomical and physiological characteristics, including classrooms, hormones, and reproductive organs. It serves as a baseline biological classification, male, female, or intersex. However, as Lauber and Moore 2002 emphasize, gender is a distinct social constructed area of roles, expectations, behaviors, and identities that societies ascribe to individuals based on that perceived sex. While sex provides the physiological context of health, such as hormonal cliff or reproductive death, gender acts as the lens through which those biological realities are interpreted by the medical establishment and the community. These social constructs influence every level of healthcare, from the way a woman's symptoms are interpreted, often being dismissed as neurotic or emotional, to determining who in a household receive the most nutrient-dense prestige foods. By recognizing gender as a fluid and socially constructed institution, we can better understand why universal health policies often fail to achieve equity. Patriarchy functions as a pervasive system of power where male dominance and masculine coded values predominates across the social, political, and economic sphere. In the context of healthcare, these patriarchal structures manifest through a concentration of men in medical leadership, which directly influences the setting of research agendas and the fundamental design of health services. According to Sen and Oslin 2008, this bias often results in clinical spaces and protocols that are non-neutral, reflecting a word built for the main default. Beyond leadership, patriarchy establishes a rigid hierarchy that prioritizes men's health needs while marginalizing those who do not conform to binary gender expectations. Women and gender minorities frequently face systemic discrimination and even violence within health settings, where their voices are silenced or their symptoms are dismissed as neurotic. This hierarchy ensures that the subordination trap is reinforced even within the clinic. For instance, life-saving nutritional resources may be diverted to male family members because the patriarchal prestige food model is accepted as a social norm by both the community and the provider. The impact of this systemic power is most evident in how health services are delivered. If the design of a health center does not account for the safety, privacy, and specific biological milestone of women, such as the hormonal cliff of the postpartum period, it effectively bars them from care. As stated by Vindhya 2007, dismantling patriarchy in health requires more than just including women in the data. It requires a complete restructuring of power so that health sovereignty becomes an accessible reality for everyone, regardless of their position in the social hierarchy. Health services, comprising the institutions, policies, personnel, and the processes directed to promoting and restoring health, are far from neutral. Instead, these structures often reflect and reproduce the broader gender norms and inequalities prevalent in society. This lack of neutrality is most evident in how symptoms are interpreted and treated. In contrast, as highlighted by Hamburg 2008, men's health concerns are statistically treated with greater clinical seriousness. This disparity is a direct manifestation of patriarchal assumptions that position the male experience as the baseline for normal health, while viewing the female experience through a lens of emotional instability. The profound impact of these gender norms is further visible in the medicalization of women's bodies, where natural life stages like menstruation or menopause are treated as pathologies requiring invasive control. This is compounded by persistent double standards in reproductive healthcare and the systemic invisibility of health issues faced by trans, non-binary, and gender-diverse individuals. According to Fasto Sterling 2012, these biases do not just affect individual care, they shape the very specific knowledge produced by the system. To move towards true health equity, health services must move beyond these binaries, patriarchal frameworks, and acknowledge the diverse intersectional realities of all patients. Let's dive a little deep in the history of gender in healthcare. Historically, healthcare systems and medical institutions have not functioned as neutral spaces. Instead, they have fundamentally reflected and reinforced the broader patriarchal structures of society. In most cultures, the field of medicine was established as a male-dominated profession, while men occupying the authoritative roles of physicians, surgeons, and administrators. By contrast, as noted by Witts 1992, women's role was systematically confined to the domestic sphere, primarily as caregivers within the family or the local community. This gender divide of labor ensured that medical leadership remained a masculine prerogative, where women's labor, though essential for survival, was devalued and stripped of professional status. This exclusion extended deep into the intellectual foundation of the craft. Ancient and medieval medical texts were largely authored by men and frequently excluded women's biological perspectives and lived experiences. Furthermore, as documented by Ehrenreich and English 1973, women who did possess specialized medical knowledge, such as midwives or herbalists, were often marginalized or stigmatized by the rising professional medical class. In some historical eras, these women were even persecuted, a process that effectively criminalized traditional female healing practices and consolidated power within a paternalistic medical community. By silencing female healers and ignoring their knowledge of the body, early medical institutions created a baseline of human experience that was, in reality, a male experience. The 18th and the 19th century marked a critical turning point with the rise of scientific medicine, which led to the formal institutionalization and professionalization of healthcare. However, this progress simultaneously entrenched gender divisions by codifying them into law and policy. As medical schools and professional associations emerged, they were almost exclusively reserved for men, while women were systematically barred from obtaining medical education or professional licensure. Within this newly professionalized landscape, nursing became one of the few health careers deemed socially acceptable for women. This was not a move towards equality, but rather a reinforcement of a rigid hierarchy that mirrored patriarchal family structures. According to Davis 1995, the system positioned male doctors in roles of ultimate clinic and administrative authority, while female nurses were relegated to providing subordinate nurturing support. This division of labor solidified the idea that men were the masters of biological science, while women were merely the executors of care, a dynamic that continues to influence the power imbalance in patient-provider relationships today. The legacy of this institutionalized bias is a medical system that often treats the female body as a special case rather than the norm. The 20th century witnessed gradual yet significant shift as women successfully fought for entry into medical schools and the broader professions of pharmacy and public health. This era marked the beginning of a breakdown in the institutionalized bias of previous centuries as women moved from being purely caregivers to becoming recognized medical professionals. However, as RISCA 2011 points out, even as female participation increased, deeply ingrained gender expectations persisted within the medical hierarchy. This resulted in a horizontal segregation where specialists perceived as caring or soft, such as pediatrics or obstetrics, and nursing became increasingly feminized, while high status roles in surgery, cardiology, and administrative leadership remained predominantly male dominated. These gendered stereotypes and power imbalance did not just affect the workforce. They fundamentally shaped the delivery of patient care and the prioritization of health needs. Historically, women's physical pain and clinical symptoms were frequently dismissed or attributed to emotional or psychological causes, a legacy of the hysteria diagnosis of previous eras. In contrast, according to Hamburg 2008, men's health concerns were typically treated with greater clinical legitimacy and urgency. In recent decades, the intersection of feminist activism and gender studies has brought increasing scrutiny to the structural inequalities within healthcare, successfully challenging long-standing stereotypes and advocating for more equitable institutions. While these efforts have led to greater gender diversity among health professionals, the distribution of power remains skewed. Leadership positions such as hospital boards, deans of medical schools, and heads of specialized surgical departments remain disproportionately held by men. As noted by Sen and Oslin 2008, this glass ceiling in medical leadership ensures that implicit biases and patriarchal assumptions continue to influence both institutional culture and the actual delivery of care to patients. Let us understand the Indian perspective. Historically, women in India have occupied essential roles as caregivers, midwives or dais, and local healers, serving as the backbone of community health for centuries. Within this ancient Ayurvedic and Unani medical system, female practitioners were frequently sought out by their expertise in women's and children's health. However, as noted by Kumar 1997, these roles were largely informal and lacked the formal authority or social recognition granted to male practitioners. Women's medical knowledge was often characterized as domestic or spiritual rather than scientific. The landscape of Indian medicine shifted dramatically during the colonial period with the imposition of British structures that formalized health services and introduced Western medical education. These newly established formal institutions, including hospitals and medical colleges, were primarily restricted to men, both in terms of those practicing medicine and those reviewing treatment. However, the intersection of gender and caste created unique barriers for Indian women seeking care or education. As highlighted by Forbes 1943, social norms such as parda and gender seclusion severely limited women's ability to consult with male doctors or attend male-dominated educational institutions. For women from upper caste, these restrictions often meant a complete denial of access to emerging medical technologies, while for those from marginalized communities, it meant the further erosion of their traditional healing roles. The late 19th and early 20th centuries marked a pivotal shift in the Indian healthcare landscape as the demand for female doctors intensified. The shift was driven largely by the cultural and social reluctance of the time, which made it difficult for women to be attended by male physicians, particularly in the sensitive areas of childbirth and gynecology. In response, reformers and colonial administrators began establishing dedicated institutes to bridge this gap. Landmark milestones included the foundation of Lady Hardinge Medical College 1916 in Delhi and the Christian Medical College 1918 in Vellore. These institutions were instrumental in training the first generations of Indian women as professional doctors and nurses, providing a formal alternative to the informal roles of the dais. However, despite these advancements in education and participation, the foundational structure of Indian medicine remained rigid hierarchical. While women gained entry into the profession, they were often funneled into roles that mirrored traditional domestic expectations. Leadership, surgery, and high-level policy decision-making remained a male-dominated domain. Women were strategically steered towards caring professions such as nursing and midwifery, and in more contemporary times into the demanding roles of community health worker through the Asha and Anganwadi systems. Even today, Indian healthcare institutes reflect strong gender divisions. While women now mark up a significant portion of medical students and graduates, they remain underrepresented in senior faculty, hospital administration, and surgical specialties. Nurses, frontline health workers such as ASHAs and auxiliary nurse midwives are overwhelmingly women, often from marginalized backgrounds, and face low pay, insecure working conditions, and minimal decision-making power. Patriarchal attitudes persist in medical curricula, workplace dynamics, and patient-provider intersections. For instance, women doctors may face discrimination, sexual harassment, and pressures to balance family obligations with demanding professional roles. Furthermore, gender bias continues to affect diagnosis and treatment. Women's symptoms, especially pain or reproductive complaints, are more likely to be dismissed as psychological. At the same time, male health concerns might be of greater urgency and require more resources. Women's movement and feminist health activism in India have been at the forefront of challenging these systemic inequalities since the 1970s, marking a significant shift in the national health discourse. This activism initially gained momentum as a radical response to the state-sponsored forced sterilizations during the emergency period, which highlighted the dehumanizing potential of the paternalistic medical system. Since then, the movement has evolved to address a broad spectrum of rights, including demands for respectful maternity care, equitable workplace policies for medical professionals, and the implementation of gender-sensitive medical training. As noted by Sen and Dhawan 2018, these efforts seek to transform women from passive recipients of population control into active agents of their own health sovereignty. Current initiatives include the systemic gender mainstreaming of medical curricula to ensure that future doctors are trained to recognize and eliminate implicit biases. Campaigns for pay equity among frontline health workers such as ASHAs and A&M staff, who are also central to these reforms, aiming to provide professional dignity to the women who form the backbone of the rural health infrastructure. Let us understand the patriarchal structures in medical education and leadership. First, the Western perspective. The history of medical education in Western countries, most notably the United States, Canada, and Europe, mirrored the patriarchal imprint found in the global South. Until the mid-20th century, women were systematically excluded from the professional medical sphere. Those who broke through these barriers often face overt hostility, a total lack of mentorship, and institutional discrimination. Despite the 21st century shift where women now make up the majority of medical students in several Western nations, patriarchal structures endure through more subtle yet equally rigid mechanisms. These mechanisms included, first, the persistent glass ceiling. While entry-level representation is high, women remain starkly underrepresented at the top. Data from Wallace and Jacobs 2008 shows a leaky pipeline where fewer women reach the rank of full professor, department head, or dean. Second, specialty segregation. A horizontal hierarchy persists where women are often funneled into lower paying, lower status primary care roles, while high intervention specialists like cardiology and neurosurgery remains male dominated. Third, systemic structural barriers. Rigid work culture that lack family-friendly policies create a caregiver tax, forcing women to choose between career advancement and domestic responsibilities. And fourth, scrutiny gap. Women in leadership face a double bind where they are evaluated more harshly than their male peers and often lack access to the informal old boys club and mentoring networks that facilitate promotion. These Western disparities prove that increased participation does not automatically equate to equity. Without the fundamental dismantling of the institutional culture, addressing everything from the gender pay gap to the microaggressions that stall careers, the medical establishment continues to operate as a hierarchy of power rather than a meritocracy. The scrutiny gap. Women in leadership face a double bind where they are evaluated more harshly than their male peers and often lack access to the informal old boys clubs and mentoring networks that facilitate promotion. These Western disparities prove that increased participation does not automatically equate to equity. Without a fundamental dismantling of the institutional culture, addressing everything from the gender pay gap to the microaggressions that stall careers, the medical establishment continues to operate as a hierarchy of power rather than a meritocracy. As the Delhi Declaration of 2026 suggests, achieving true health sovereignty requires a global effort to mainstream gender diversity into the very highest echelons of medical governance. Let's have a look at the Indian perspective. Historically, medical education in India has been a mirror to the country's broader patriarchal structures. During the colonial and early post-colonial periods, medical schools, faculty positions, and senior hospital administration were almost exclusively male dominates. When women did manage to enter the profession, their entry was often channeled rather than open. They were recruited primarily to address cultural sensitivities such as providing care for female patients who could not be seen by men due to norms of seclusion. As noted by Forbes 1943, this created a functional but segregated system where women were clustered into feminine domains, gynecology, pediatrics, and public health. In contemporary India, the landscape has shifted numerically with a drastic rise in the number of female medical students and graduates. However, this increased participation has not yet translated into executive equity. The leaky pipeline phenomena remains a persistent barrier. As women move up the career ladder, their representation thins out significantly. While they may dominate the classroom, they remain rare in the corridors of power, occupying very few roles as deans, directors, department chairs, or high-level governmental health policy makers. The stagnation at the top requires that the medical leadership continues to be viewed through a predominantly male lens. The barrier include, first, the persistent gender biases that favor men for leadership and decision-making roles. Next, the societal expectations that women prioritize family limit their career trajectories compared to men. Sexual harassment, discrimination, and lack of supportive institutional policies. And last, stereotyping and subtle discouragement from entering specialties perceived as male, for example, surgery. Nursing and frontline health roles remain feminized but undervalued, both financially and in terms of status or influence, despite women making up the majority of these workers. The absence of women from top healthcare decision making reinforces policies and environments that may not adequately address gender needs or support the advancement of other women in the health professions. From the colonial era, the Indian medical field has functioned as a structural mirror to the wider social patriarchy, both in the opportunities it provided and the rigid hierarchy it maintained. Medical education was initially established as an exclusive male domain. For instance, the Calcutta Medical College, founded in 1835, admitted only male students for decades. As noted by Forbes 1943, this early institutional design ensured that the scientific authority of modern medicine was birthed as a masculine prerogative, leaving women entirely outside the formal boundaries of clinical knowledge. Women's eventual entry into these elite spaces were met with significant institutional opposition. According to Kumar 1997, this resistance was rooted in prevailing Victorian and Brahmanical beliefs regarding women's natural roles, which deemed them biological or temperamentally unsuitable for the rigors of scientific pursuit and medical training. When the doors to medical schools did slowly open, it was rarely out of commitment to gender equality. Rather, it was a pragmatic response to the social and religious practices of parda and gender seclusion, which prevented many women from being treated by male doctors. Even after independence, the medical education system maintained distinct lines. Women were overrepresented in feminine specializations such as gynecology, pediatrics, and community health. Specialists perceived as more prestigious or demanding like surgeries, cardiology, or orthopedics remained male-dominated. Nursing, paramedical, and auxiliary roles like ANMs and ASHA workers became highly feminized, often attracting women from lower socioeconomic or rural backgrounds. This segregation limits professional diversity for female practitioners and shapes perceptions among Indian professionals and in broader society about whose expertise and labor are most valued in the health system. Structural parity in Indian medicine remains starkly evident in the disproportionate underrepresentation of women within leadership roles, creating a significant authority gap despite increasing enrollments. As Gupta 2020 observed, while some regions in India have achieved near gender parity in medical college admissions, the numerical equality does not translate to the upper echelons of the profession. Women rarely ascend to positions as deans, heads of department, and hospital directors. The stagnation is fueled by the culture where ambitious women face heightened scrutiny and are frequently expected to conform to traditional family and gender roles. Consequently, many are forced to either sacrifice their career aspirations or negative intense social criticism for prioritizing professional advancements over domestic expectations. The institutional environment further solidifies these barriers by failing to provide gender-sensitive policies that acknowledge the biological and social realities of female practitioners. Essential supports such as robust maternity leave, flexible training options, or infrastructure for balancing family and work responsibilities are often missing or stigmatized. Sexual harassment and the persistent lack of responsive grievance mechanisms remain significant structural concerns within Indian medical colleges and hospitals. As noted by Raj 2016, women medical students and professionals frequently report a continuum of exclusion ranging from subtle microaggressions and implicit bias to overt discrimination and harassment. These hostile environments are often protected by a culture of silence within patriarchal medical hierarchies, where reporting such issues can lead to professional retaliation or social stigma. This lack of safety not only impacts the mental well-being of female practitioners, but also functions as a primary driver of subordination trap, discouraging women from pursuing high-pressure leadership roles where they might feel unprotected. Furthermore, the physical and cultural design of the medical work environment is often fundamentally unsupportive of women navigating significant life milestones such as marriage or childbearing. The rigid all-or-nothing nature of medical residencies and senior clinical roles create a steep caregiver tax, leading to high attrition rates for women who wish to return after career breaks. Without flexible training options, re-entry programs, or on-site childcare, the system effectively penalizes women for biological and social realities that their male counterparts rarely face. This institutional rigidity ensures that the leaky pipeline remains open, draining the system of experienced female talent just as they reach the threshold of senior leadership. The patriarchal barriers within the Indian medical system are not felt uniformly. They are significantly intensified for women from marginalized castes, tribal backgrounds, or religious minorities. These individuals face a layer of intersectional discrimination that complicates both their entry into medical education and their subsequent advancement within the profession. As Sen and Dhawan 2018 argue, a Dalit woman or a woman from scheduled tribe does not just navigate the subordination trap of gender, she also contends with deeply entrenched systemic prejudices related to her social identity. This double burden often manifests in the form of social exclusion and lack of ancestral professional networks. Let us discuss some of the recent challenges and activism. Frontline healthcare roles such as accredited social health activists or ASHAs are occupied mainly by rural, low-caste women who play crucial, under-recognized roles in public health, yet face meager pay, lack of job security, and inadequate institutional respect. Feminist health movements have begun advocating for pay parity, supportive work environment, and proactive measures to address gender bias in education and practice. Policy shifts are visible in gender mainstreaming in health training, curriculum development to address gender sensitivity, and Indian Medical Association led efforts to promote women in leadership. However, profound change is slow and often localized. The contemporary landscape of Indian healthcare is defined by a stark paradox. The system's foundational strength relies on a massive, feminized workforce that remains systematically undervalued. Frontline healthcare roles, most notably the accredited social health activists or ASHAs, are occupied almost entirely by rural women, many from marginalized castes. As noted by Sen and Dhawan 2018, these women are lifeblood of public health, driving immunization, maternal care, and community education. Let us now understand the gender bias in health research and diagnosis. In order to know what factors lead to gender bias in health research and diagnosis, it is important to first understand what gender bias actually means. A lack of neutrality in research has profound implications for diagnosis. When the baseline for normal physiology is based on male data, the unique symptomatic expressions of women, such as different presentations of cardiovascular diseases or autoimmune conditions, are frequently missed or misread. According to Lauber and Moore 2002, this often leads to the medicalization of women's natural life stages, while their actual pathological complaints are dismissed. In 2026, the push for health sovereignty involves moving beyond gender-neutral policies that mask hidden inequities and instead adopting an intersectional approach that integrates sex, gender as primary variables in every stage of scientific inquiry. The manifestation of gender bias include underrepresentation in research. For much of the 20th century, women were systematically excluded from clinical trials and medical research. This exclusion was often justified by researchers who cited concerns over hormonal variability, the complexities of reproductive cycle, or the potential risk to future pregnancies. By treating the female body as a complicated deviation from the norm, medical science effectively established the male body as the universal baseline. Consequently, as noted by Measure and Jones, the vast majority of medical knowledge, including drug dosages, diagnosis criteria, and treatment protocols, was developed using data derived predominantly from male participants. Second, misdiagnosis and stereotyping. First, in heart diseases. Heart disease is often mistakenly viewed as male affliction, largely because medical textbooks and research have focused on the crushing chest pain typical of male heart attack. However, women are more likely to experience subtler symptoms such as extreme fatigue, nausea, or jaw pain. According to Hamburg 2008, because these symptoms deviate from the male standard, they are frequently dismissed or misattributed to anxiety or diagnosis issues. This diagnostic delay results in significantly poorer clinical conditions and outcomes and higher mortality rates for women. Similarly, women reporting pain, fatigue, or neurological symptoms are more likely than men to have their complaints attributed to psychological causes rather than physical illness. This can lead to underdiagnosis of autoimmune diseases, thyroid disorders, or endometriosis, and inappropriate prescriptions for sedatives or antidepressants rather than necessary medical intervention. There's a persistent clinical tendency to psychologize female physical distress. Women reporting chronic pain, fatigue, or neurological symptoms are statistically more likely than men to have their complaints attributed to emotional or psychological causes rather than physical illness. As noted by Werner and Melchior, 2003, this bias leads to the chronic underdiagnosis of serious conditions like autoimmune diseases, thyroid disorders, and endometriosis. Instead of receiving necessary medical interventions, women are often inappropriately prescribed sedatives or antidepressants, a modern reflection of the historical hysteria diagnosis. Conditions unique to women, such as menstrual disorder, PCOS, and endometriosis, have historically occupied the periphery of medical sciences. These issues receive significantly less research funding and clinical attention than conditions affecting men, leading to the profound lack of effective diagnostic and tools and treatments. Medical research and health science frameworks have historically operated within a rigid male or female binary, a systemic oversight that has effectively erased the specific health needs of transgenders, non-binary, and intersex populations. By failing to account for diverse gender identities and biological variations, the medical establishment has created a state of institutional invisibility. As noted by Richard Apted et al. 2016, this lack of inclusive data and guidelines lead to inappropriate clinical care, where gender diverse individuals are often forced to navigate a system that does not recognize their unique physiological or psychological requirements. The consequences of this pervasive gender bias are multifaceted and result in a cascading failure of clinical justice. The worst health outcomes. Women and gender minorities frequently experience lower diagnostic accuracy and delayed treatments. The reliance on untested medications developed primarily on male subjects often lead to unexpected and severe side effects, directly compromising patient safety. Inequity in resource allocation. Research funding and institutional attention remain skewed towards male-dominated conditions. This creates a research deficit for issues like endometriosis or gender-affirming care, which are often neglected to the periphery of national health budgets. Mistrust in the health system. Persistent gender bias and the dismissal of lived experiences undermine patient confidence. When individuals feel their identity or symptoms are being invalidated, they are less likely to engage with healthcare providers, leading to a dangerous cycle of medical avoidance. Perpetuation of stereotypes. Bias embedded in medical training reinforces harmful gender stereotypes among the next generation of professionals. According to Vindhya 2007, dismantling these biases is essential for moving towards health sovereignty. In 2026, the goal of medical reforms must be the creation of a truly intersectional framework, one that replaces binary assumptions with a model of care that respects the complexity of human biology and identity. Only by addressing these systemic failures can we ensure that the healthcare system provides equitable, accurate, and dignified care for every individual. Addressing gender bias in medical research and diagnosis is no longer just a theoretical goal. It has become a central focus of feminist scholarships and global health activism. By revealing the male as norm standard as a scientific flaw rather than a neutral baseline, these movements have paved the way for structural shifts in how medicine is taught, funded, and practiced. As noted by Hamburg, the transition from the gender-blind to gender-sensitive healthcare model is essential for achieving clinical justice and ensuring that the specific biological and social reality of all patients are accurately addressed. Thank you.